the Chair and the committee for this opportunity to make some remarks about Labor members' dissenting report. I'm joined by all of the Labor colleagues who participated in the committee process. The member for Macarthur and the member for Lindsay are here today. I'd like to thank everybody who, of course, wrote submissions to this inquiry and took the time and effort to appear before it. I'd also like to thank at the outset the support from the Secretariat under the leadership of Sharon Claydon, and I acknowledge their presence here today. Regretfully, Labor cannot support the government's report, which, contrary to government claims, will ultimately see a return to Australia's reprehensible legacy of permanently removing First Nations children from their families. We know that this policy has a profoundly disproportionate impact on First Nations children, and from the beginning of this inquiry, we have been dogged by complaints of bias and preconceived outcomes from organisational representatives and First Nations organisations and individuals in particular. Some stakeholders said that they have been actively excluded in favour of witnesses who supported adoption, and I know that the Secretariat has been very challenged in trying to respond to these concerns raised by stakeholder groups and have done their best, but I have to say that Labor committee members held our own concerns at the outcome of the outcome of this inquiry was a foregone conclusion. First, some background. In March this year, the then Assistant Minister for Children and Families, David Gillespie, sparked community outrage with an unprompted public call to open up adoptions of Indigenous children from out-of-home care. Unsurprisingly, the proposal was quickly condemned by the experts and First Nations representatives alike, with ABSEC Chief Executive labelling it incredibly offensive. But rather than listening, the minister in fact doubled down by referring this inquiry to the committee just a few weeks after he made those inflammatory comments. If Labor was suspicious about the referral of the inquiry, our suspicions were indeed confirmed by the first of only two terms of reference which called for the consideration of, and I quote, stability and permanency for children in out-of-home care with local adoption as a viable option, a virtual echo of the minister's ill-conceived call. Regretfully, but as Labor members predicted, the government members' report then went on to recommend we open up adoption to children in out-of-home care exactly as the minister had suggested. Attempts by Labor to work through a bipartisan position for a consensus report were rejected. This is a shame, but it confirmed that the sole purpose of the report was to support the minister's original assertion. Labor members simply cannot countenance this recommendation, which would have a detrimental and disproportionate impact on First Nations communities, given their children are 10 times more likely to be in out-of-home care. It would cast aside the evidence-based Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander placement principle. It severs children's links to their family and culture and risks creating another stolen generation. The government members' report not only wilfully ignores the weight of evidence from submitters, it also flies in the face of human rights conventions and the recommendations of countless inquiries that connection to kin, culture and country is critical to the safety and well-being of First Nations children. The proposed plan in the government members' report rests solely upon diverting children from out-of-home care into open adoption, which purports to be about providing an open exchange of information and contact between children and their birth parents and families. However, many witnesses told the committee that their lived experience of so-called open adoption was very different indeed. Indeed, there is no agreed definition as to how on open adoption, let alone how this works. In the very few remaining moments, I urge this government to reconsider their position. Organisations and individuals have pleaded with us not to return to those despicable policies of the past. Sadly, their concerns have been ignored. I plead with the government not to make the same mistake and reconsider these recommendations.